What is one rule that was implemented at your school or work that backfired horribly? In my dorm, if you did something that triggered the smoke or fire alarm, you had to do a safety presentation for everyone on your floor. This was intended to deter pranksters from pulling the alarm. A guy on our floor was making grilled cheese in the kitchenette and burned it, which legitimately triggered the fire alarm. Afterwards, he explained, assuming that since it had been a legitimate alarm and not a prank, that he wouldn't have to do a presentation. He was, of course, wrong. So, the next Wednesday night, the entire floor assembled, and we were treated to a 30-minute safety presentation on the dangers of grilled cheese sandwiches. It contained literally nothing about fire safety. It was all choking hazards and cholesterol. Our RA was furious, but the student pointed out that the write-up he'd been given just said, safety presentation. We didn't get any more presentations after that. They made a new rule where we had to ask permission to use the restroom during lunch. We all coordinated, and the whole cafeteria would raise their hands at once to request to go. They responded by sending us 2 at a time. We did this for a few days, then changed our procedure to everyone just getting up at once and going to the restroom without permission. They didn't ever officially do away with the rule, but the teachers on duty in the lunchroom eventually just stopped enforcing it. Edit. It's interesting how many people responded something like, my school had the same rule, and how many people said something like, what the fuck? That's the craziest rule I've ever heard of. Is this even real? My high school was trying to prevent a senior prank since the class before us had got a little out of hand. They basically told us not to have one, that they would get anyone who did anything in a lot of trouble, yada yada. So somebody has an idea. What if we do an anti-prank? The idea had floated around the halls and everyone knew what we were going to do. For an entire week, every senior was going to bring a potentially threatening item for a senior prank and do nothing with it. The week starts, and that Monday, nearly the entire senior class carries a banana with them to every class. This is a school of around 2,600 student, 650 graduating class. So there are hundreds of bananas being carried through the halls. Teachers and assistant principals freaking out. By noon, an announcement was made that all bananas needed to be eaten or thrown away or they would be confiscated. So by that afternoon, every banana was taken away from the student. The next day got even better. Somebody has the idea that we should all bring a gallon jug of water with us to class. And to no one's surprise, again, there is an announcement that they are going to start taking up the water jugs for fear of what we are going to do with them. But this time, the students got creative. People are resentful now and not wanting to give up their precious water. Students are getting creative, hiding them in backpacks, avoiding teachers in the hallways. Whatever it took to keep their water jugs. But alas, most of the jugs had been confiscated. So the students start taking to social media. Tons of tweets and mentions are going out to local news stations, TMZ, Oprah, Ellen, you name it, they got mentioned. All of these messages are going out along the lines of, school is confiscating all water, not allowing students to drink water. Hashtag high school drought 2KXX, hashtag we're dying, hashtag send help. You get the picture. Before the end of the day, 2 different news reporters were at our school. Guess we had the last laugh after all. TLDR, school made silly rules to not let us have a senior prank. We anti-pranked them and their rules backfired. Lots of negative press over nothing malicious ever happening. Our school made it so you couldn't play dodgeball anymore. So what happened is that the gym teachers came up with this new game called Fireball. The rules are there are balls in the middle of the gym. People go on 2 separate teams, go for it, and if you get hit, you're out. If you catch a ball, Okay, so it was basically dodgeball. Then Fireball was banned. So now there's this new game called Pinball, which isn't involving the machines, unfortunately, but it's basically dodgeball/fireball, but there's bowling pins that need to be knocked over as well. I think they just gave up after a while. I'm a programmer. On a previous job, the developers and teams were measured by the number of feature requests they completed. We figured out to subdivide everything to blow it up into the maximum number of feature requests possible. A manager might request a new report. We'd set up separate feature tickets for Create Button, Make Button Blue, Make Button Respond when clicked. Implement business logic, display results in grid, allow sorting of grid, and so on. We'd subdivide a one-day task into 20 one-hour tasks. Management loved it. Our team looked 20 times as productive despite deliberately slowing ourselves down with red tape. If you violated the dress code policy, you had to wear these really big gray sweatpants or sweatshirts that said DCV in big orange letters. Dress code violation. It became a thing to get caught because they were apparently really comfortable. When the admin finally caught on that people were trying to get them on purpose, they changed it so you got in-school suspension. Joke's on them for that too. Lots of kids preferred that over being in class. New manager got rid of the sofa in the break room so people couldn't nap on their hour-long lunch break. No one overslept or took the piss, but it was good to have the option on a tough day. Stoner guy started sleeping in other places, including in between walls and the warehouse. That's when we started losing him and couldn't find him as he'd go into a deeper sleep and was less likely to be disturbed. He didn't lose his job somehow. That place had a hard time hiring. Edit. To clarify where the stoner guy would go, we'd find him in between walls and shelves. It was a DIY store that had been something else years before, so there were random partition walls and oddly laid out shelving units everywhere. A real shit show of a store layout. He had quite a few places to hide in and nap. I used to work for a production company that employed a lot of really skilled, award-winning editors. There were producers and executives and directors, but the real moneymakers, the people who really made the company, were the editors. So the company was basically centered around them. The executives would always order in food for the editors, and the editors would usually eat in their offices while doing their thing. One day, the executives decided to cut paid lunches to save money. The editors all thought this was a dick move. So they'd go out for lunch and sometimes stay out for like 3 hours. There was nothing the company could do really because these editors were top of their game. And if Warner Bros. Heard that the editor they had always used had left, they might leave too. So the company couldn't do anything. They saved maybe $15 per person per day, but lost like 4 hours per person per day. Little backstory, my high school was a teeny tiny rural school, 600 kids in grades 7 through 12. Randomly at the beginning of second semester my senior year, the new principal, who had just moved here from an inner city school in another state, decided that we would no longer be allowed to carry backpacks or book bags in the halls between classes for safety reasons. Makes sense in this day and age, but the students were pissed about this abrupt change in clockwork of our tiny school. Shenanigans ensued after this new rule came into effect, including every student dropping their books in the hall simultaneously at 10:50 one day. My personal favorite was the guy in my class who decided he would make something that couldn't be called a backpack. First, he took a bunch of belts and tied his books together so they could be carried on his back. That was shut down after day 2. That's when it got hilarious. The next Monday, he comes waltzing in wearing a product of his own design. He had made L-shaped shelves from pieces of wood that could be connected to the sides of his legs, and proceeded to harness his books to these leg brace shelves. Needless to say, he was pulled from class before lunch. My junior high school adopted a policy to not allow kids to loiter in groups of 5 or more, in attempts to crack down on gang mentality. This was a freaking junior high. Anyway, me and my group of misfits, 6 of us, were always hanging out during free times, and the principal eventually stopped us and asked us to separate. I had to casually explain to him that we were not a group of 6, but 2 groups of 3 that were intermingling. People caught wind, and that rule was basically dead. That was one of the few times I had to explain to my father why he was called into the principal's office with me. My high school had a really bad problem with students showing up to class 5 minutes late every day. So they tried 3 different solutions. First, they stopped letting us use lockers. They quickly found out that just meant that nobody brought their books to class. Next, they decided to ban the use of restrooms between class periods. Teachers started complaining about everyone asking for a bathroom pass as soon as class started, so that was abandoned after a week or so. Lastly, one week they made a ton of announcements Monday through Wednesday that all students were to be on time for class. Then, on Tuesday, they suspended any student who was late for insubordination. Turns out that included half the football team. This occurred right before the biggest game of the year. In a town of 4,000 people, this game attracts 16,000. So yeah, they gave that up as well. My 4 years of high school were full of my school trying out new policies and procedures to use in the future. My sophomore year, my school decided to make tests count for 100% of the grade, and homework count for 0%, but it was still assigned. And as you'd expect, kids did absolutely no homework. The ones that didn't retain information well or were bad test takers struggled pretty hard to make the grade without homework padding it. Our failure rate was pretty high that year. Then, my junior year, they brought homework grades back and made a new rule that there were no due dates, nor penalties for turning in late work for your 6 weeks. We didn't do quarters. As long as it was before the next 6 weeks started, you were good. This led to students doing no homework until the last few days of the 6 weeks, and teachers had to accept and grade them all before grades were due. This put teachers under immense stress by causing them to work insane hours and spending every hour at home grading, which made them very irritable and more likely to just shove pointless activities and busy work at us until they could finish grading. I've told this story before, but my high school tried to crack down on people wearing their ties too short, as was the fashion. It got to the stage where anything except completely pristine uniforms would get you a detention, which, coming up to exam season, was one more thing we didn't want to deal with. In protest at what was widely seen as a ridiculous rule, ties started getting longer and longer. 1 foot, 2 feet, 2.5 feet, as long as people could get them. It culminated in one girl sewing 2 ties together into a 5-foot beast that trailed on the floor as she walked and resulted in the deputy head having a screaming shit fit one day about how disrespectful we all were to the uniform codes. After that, the teachers quietly gave up on the new hardline approach to uniforms, and everything went back to normal. I told this story before, but in high school, they banned backpacks in classrooms. Everyone was pissed. Some girls started bringing bigger purses to put their books in, so a bunch of dudes brought their mom's purses in and were using those for school books. Administration and teachers got upset because we found a loophole, so they banned purses too. At which point, a bunch of moms got upset because their daughters had to carry around tampons and stuff in their coat pockets, in addition to all of their books, notebooks, calculators, pens and pencils, and whatever else they have in those purses. Finally, the school let everyone have their backpacks back. Edit. Knowing that other places banned backpacks makes me feel a bit better. What would make me feel a lot better is going back in time and telling Mrs. Gaines that she can eat a bag of decomposing dongs for suggesting that we get rid of our backpacks. That lady hated teaching. And she hated students. She just loved control. Already having an authority problem, I bucked up at her more than once. I remember one story where me and a bunch of other seniors started complissolting each other. We'd pay each other compliments, but in an insulting tone. Start to act like we were going to fight, and then hug it out. We thought it was hilarious, but Mrs. Gaines thought we were being disrespectful to her authority because we'd complissult each other a bunch outside of her door. Once we learned this annoyed her, we started to do it more until some pink slips started coming out and people were getting sent to the office for complimenting each other in a loud tone. What a joke of a teacher. We got a new manager for our office. She was an outside hire and was trying to prove herself quickly, and she was obsessed with efficiency. So, her first week here, she sent out this very rudely worded email about employees eating at our desks. We have a very small break area, 4 tables, and we have about 300 employees here. And then we all had to stop eating at our desks because It was not efficient to eat and try to work at the same time. Through a coordinated effort by some of the more sassy people at the office, they all had their lunches at the same time and filled the break room with about 90 people, elbow to elbow, and they all ate standing up. Literally the next day after that happened, she sent out a follow-up email saying that we could eat at our desks, but she advised us to take a break from our work from time to time. It was pretty funny. At my college, my dorm used to have this thing called Malt Mondays. Someone would go around knocking on doors at around 8 or 9 p.m. asking if you wanted to order a 40-ounce. Then they would all go on a run to the liquor store and buy them for people that ordered them. We would all then hang out outside drinking 40s and listening to music until security came and told us to take it inside. It was a fun tradition we had, but the dean hated it. He decided to fund his own Malt Mondays, but instead of malt liquor, he wanted to draw people in with free chocolate malts. What ended up happening is people who did the regular Malt Mondays and wanted a chocolate malt would just go to that one first, get a free treat, and then leave to go drink 40s. This was just one kid, but it was hilarious. In the late 90s, humorous graphic tees became a popular thing, and the mall had a few stores that sold questionable taste shirts. Shirts that said porn star, orgasm, donor, a headless guy holding a sign that says will work for head, that type of thing. The school made a rule that if your shirt was inappropriate, you would have to turn it inside out. A kid in my class shows up to school with a shirt that says, "I'd rather be masturbating." The teacher sends him to the bathroom to turn it inside out. He returns with an inside-out shirt that says, "I put the FU in fun." The teacher doesn't realize it's the same shirt, so he takes it off in class and shows her both sides. He had a few shirts custom-made with prints on both sides. She asks him if he has another shirt in his locker, and he says, "I have my gym clothes." She told him to go get the other shirt and change. He walks back into the class with a shirt says, "You're driving me knucking futs." The teacher said, "Just go to the office." So he goes to the office and tells them that he was sent there because of his shirt. So they say, "Turn it inside out," and go back to class. So he turns his shirt inside out and walks back to the class with a shirt that says, "Free mustache rides." She said, "Did you go to the office?" And he said, "They told me to flip it inside out and come back to class." The teacher sighed and said, "Just sit down." She went about teaching and we thought he won, but he ended up getting suspended for 3 days. When he returned from suspension, he wore shirts for probably a whole week that said, "I love teachers. Support your local teachers union. Cops are the good guys. Drugs are bad. Wash behind your ears," etc. It was funny because he made these overtly positive shirts and the teachers and students would try to read into it too much to see what they really meant. As if it was just a tongue-in-cheek thing that they didn't get. Eventually, one of his positive shirts that he found said, "Support single moms," but he claims he didn't realize there was a silhouette of a stripper on a pole. He says he thought it was just a woman, so he got suspended again. As a side note, the same kid brought a blow-up doll and took her to every football game, basketball game, pep rally, etc., and gradually worked her into official school functions and brought her to school several times. For whatever reason, the teachers just gave up on that one. We passed her around over our heads at graduation. He even bought her a cap and gown. Edit. A lot of people have asked what he is up to nowadays. I am friends with him on Facebook, and he is a truck driver and bodybuilding enthusiast. The dude is jacked now at 39 years old. Sorry, nothing really related to his high school shenanigans. My old job had a draconian attendance policy, in which if you were a second late, you got a half-point demerit. If you were an hour late, you got that same half-point demerit. Demerits accrued 3 equals verbal warning, 4 equals written, either 5 or 6 was termination. In addition to making for some anxiety-filled employees that made dumb decisions to speed through snowstorms, it also meant if you got stuck in a traffic jam, you might as well just take your time, stop for gas, get breakfast, etc. Same place also had a similar policy that assured the plague spread through the whole place. Say you came to work at 7. By 9 a.m., you've got a fever and full-blown flu symptoms. If you clock out then, you get a whole point demerit. But if you sit there coughing and shivering and infecting your coworkers for another 2 hours till your shift was half over, you only got a half-point demerit. My high school student council decided to use their funds to build a bike cage. The idea was to reduce theft. Bikes go in at the start of the day and are locked up until the end of the day. There would still be racks outside the cage for students to use who needed to leave in the middle of the day. Dentist, cutting class, etc., etc. I told the other council members that the bike cage would cause a huge increase in traffic, as what was previously an open bike rack would now have one exit and entrance. Additionally, it would actually increase theft, as people could now cut locks in the cage without worrying about someone looking at them through the covered fence. They were planning a chain-link fence with slats around it. Guess what fucking happened? Bike theft increased and traffic around the bike cage became a nightmare. I quit the student council after they made that decision. My senior year of high school, we got moved into a new school building across from a grocery store. The builders put walls up over the plumbing for water fountains by accident, so there was a huge increase in reusable water bottles. And the school put up a vending machine entirely full of water. Now, I suppose it's time to mention that this was in Washington State, where you can sell liquor in grocery stores along with anything else. So, some freshmen got the bright idea to start stealing vodka from the store across the street, fill disposable water bottles with it, and sell it to other students. This caused a huge problem with a large population of drunk underclassmen wandering the halls of the school and getting into trouble. Finally, the staff got together for a meeting about what to do. Someone suggested banning water bottles. So now students had no access to water during school hours, and everyone was enraged. There were articles written about it and parents complaining. People all over town were talking about how we had a ban on water. They eventually lifted the ban, and the vodka problem resumed. TLDR, my school had kids selling booze in water bottles and banned water. If you had 4 tardies in a semester, including first or 0 hour, you would receive a Saturday morning detention. I had accumulated 3 tardies during a semester of my sophomore year because my ride would be a few minutes late. I proceeded to skip school anytime my ride or myself would be late, and eventually a vice principal noticed my absences. Naturally, he asked why I was missing so many days of class. I explained to him that I wasn't going to get a detention for going to school. His only recourse was to suggest that I try to be on time more often. Felt good to walk out of his office knowing that conversation didn't go how he expected. IT department changed how work is given out and how time is accounted for. Had to fill out daily timesheets that accounted for every 15-minute section of time with a summary of what you've worked on. Anyone that needed IT help had to go through one person. The problem is that the one person giving out work had no clue who had what skills. The timesheets were a waste. We had to stop and report what we were working on. Classic micromanagement. Within months, the entire IT staff left except one guy. Don't micromanage when the job market is full of other jobs.